Hello and welcome to ViewPoint Christian Academy, where we have been empowering parents for Christian education since 1984 through our biblical, individualized, and mastery-based approach. It is our privilege and our honor to assist you in any way that we possibly can to help disciple your children, because we believe that education equals discipleship. We want to help you disciple them in the ways of the Lord and help build a biblical worldview into their life. So today, we're going to continue our discussion in our Monday Moment this week from last week. And last week, we talked about benchmarks. If monitoring academic progress was a coin, one side would be benchmarks, and the other side, what we're talking about today, and that is assessments. Stay tuned as we talk about assessing your students' work as they progress and achieve each benchmark. Don't go away. All right, let's talk about assessments. Now, again, just as a quick review, last week we talked about benchmarks, and benchmarks ensure adequate progress, right? We talked about daily benchmarks with the gold card, weekly benchmark of a checkup and a quiz that is occurring in each subject. Monthly, every 3 to 4 weeks, you should be completing a unit in testing, whether it's paper booklet or online. And then, of course, our quarterly benchmarks. And the quarterly benchmarks would be in the paper-paced curriculum, 3 completed units per quarter. In our Ignitia, 2 to 3, because there's only 10 for the year. So 2 to 3 units per quarter in each subject. These are our benchmarks. And benchmarks, again, are things that you look to help you know that you're on track and you're making progress, you're moving forward. But you can't just take benchmarks and say, okay, I've achieved it. I am where I need to be, because you also have to assess those benchmarks. So benchmarks ensure adequate progress, yes, but assessments ensure the quality of the progress. And you got to have both. You got to have movement forward, and you have to have an ensuring that the quality is good. This is why we have what's called mastery-based learning at ViewPoint Christian Academy. So that, again, it's not time that's spent in a classroom, it's actually measured learning. We measure the learning through assessment that the student is completing. We want to make sure that they are moving forward and that they are moving forward and learning adequately the things that need to be learned. So when you assess, you're finding the level of competency or mastery for that amount of work that was completed. Now, in business, it's like quality assurance, right? So when a business, creates a product and they send it out, they don't just create it and send it out and hope for the best. No, they go through a process of ensuring the quality of the product. You get a piece of cloth, you pull it out. Sometimes you see the little number, inspected by number 1 or inspected by number 3 or whatever it might be. They actually tested it. They checked to make sure that it was of quality and should go out to the public for sale. Because, again, you don't want to make sure that you're just producing things. You want to make sure you're producing things of a good, high quality and caliber. And that's why we assess. That's why we do that. And so when you assess, you're finding that level of competency or mastery and ensuring the quality. Has the student actually learned the material, or have they just gone through and answered some, looked at a couple of pages of material, answered some questions, and then moved on? No, have they actually learned something? So we want to assess that to make sure that they have learned. Now, again, in business, it's like quality assurance. If you're thinking of maybe in terms of security, right? In security, it's like a gate or a checkpoint to make sure that they don't get by with something that they shouldn't get by with, right? So we have to make sure that actually the students aren't just sliding by, they're not just being pushed forward. We want to make sure that they are learning what they need to learn, that they're getting through with only with what they need, and that they're not sliding by and getting by with something that they ought not to. Now, assessing can take many forms. The most common form, of course, of assessment is testing. But that's just one way to assess. There are so many other ways to assess the learning. You can look at what's happening and you can assess it. You can say, okay, this student, in fact, what's the very first thing that ViewPoint does when a student comes to us? We give them a placement test. What is that? That's an assessment, finding out what they do and don't know, where their learning level is actually supposed to be, so we can place them appropriately. So we do an assessment, and we analyze that assessment and say, okay, based on this student needs such and such. Okay, but again, we have to assess the work regularly. If you're only assessing once a year, then you're failing. You're failing your child. You're failing your students as a school. We would be failing our students as a school. We actually need to assess constantly and continually, multiple times a day. Our program is designed to assess a child's progress multiple times a day. Because again, if they reach a benchmark and progress forward, then they're going to achieve the progress that they need. But when they achieve that benchmark, whether it's daily goals, it needs to be assessed. If they get to that quiz or that checkup, that needs to be assessed. If they get to the end of the unit and take the test, that needs to be what? Assessed. How are they doing? How is their progress? Is the quality up to the standards that we have established for the child? Again, what is our standard of mastery? 80% or better on a unit. But let's talk about this assessment and how it works. Because again, it's not just a test that will assess them. It's not just at the beginning. It's not just at the end of the year. It's actually multiple times every day. How does that look? Well, each benchmark needs to be assessed. Remember, what's our first benchmark? Daily goals. Getting the assignments done every day, whether it's an online Ignitia assignment per day, 1 or 2 Ignitia assignments per day in each subject, or if it's 3 to 4, 4 to 5 pages per day in paper booklet format. That learning every day needs to be assessed. Well, how does that happen? Well, in our Ignitia program, it is automatically assessed. When the student turns in the assignment, it what? Scores it and immediately gives that feedback, that assessment. You scored a 60% on this first attempt at your lesson, or you scored a 92% at your first attempt on this assessment. And then the student will go back into that lesson, look at what is wrong and see what is correct. They'll get that immediate feedback, that assessment. These are correct, these are wrong, and then go back and address those that are incorrect and make the corrections. That's how it works in an assessment, right? It says this is where you're at. This is the level of your work. Every assessment that we give is going to have some kind, if it's online, it's going to have some kind of a grade attached to it, right? And so what is the grade for a lesson assessment in Ignitia? 100%. We want the child to get every question correct. So they go back and they fix it. However many times is required, they go back and they go back through the material to make sure that they master each concept that is being assessed. Each question is a tiny assessment in a lesson. Or if you're doing the paper curriculum, you read the page of material and then your comprehension of that page of material is immediately assessed with questions. Right? So these questions are answered, and then you go up and you validate that progress by scoring. You have either the parent scores it or the child scores it, but that assessment has to occur. If a child does all the work, 10 pages, 20 pages, 30 pages, never assessed the work, you're going to run into problems. Anytime you try to get away with not doing that everyday scoring, that everyday assessment, it's going to create problems. Don't allow a day to go by where the quality of the work is not assessed and the student's scoring is not done. If they did pages that day, then at the end of the day, those pages need to be scored. They need to be checked against the score key. If the child has done the work in the Ignitia and the assessment does not equal 100% on that lesson, then they need to send the help requests, or if it's parent-led, mom, you need to open that question back up so that child can, again, attempt that question, go back in, find the answer. They need to get it all correct. They need to meet that assessment requirement of 100% on a lesson. And if they're doing the work on pages, then they need to, if something is marked as wrong, they need to go back and correct it and then assess it again and make sure it's all 100%. That accuracy, that assessment will ensure the quality of the benchmark is there. Now, if you do that every day, then that weekly assessment of a quiz or a checkup that's going to occur most every week, right? Maybe once every week and a half, but generally once every week you're going to be assessed with a quiz. What's a quiz or a checkup going to do? It's going to take several days worth of assignments, right? Lessons, or pages of material, and it's going to assess how you've done on multiple days, right? Because the child's not going to do an entire section in one day. They're going to do a part of that every day. And by the end of that, then you need to assess, well, how are they doing? What's their competency? How's that going? Well, so if the quiz comes back less than 80%, or if the checkup comes back less than 80%, fix it, redo it, go back into the material and study it. Find out what's wrong. Find out what do I need to study? Take the notes that are necessary in the paces. Do the cross-referencing that we suggest and recommend in our training videos. All of these things will ensure that you are adequately progressing through the assessment, and keep at that checkup and that quiz until you get to 80% or better. Again, why? Because this is, again, the quality assurance. This is the security checkpoint. You got to make sure before they get to the end of the unit and are ready to take that big final test, that each step along the way, that assessment is helping you build quality and progress. Reaching those benchmarks is important, but making sure that the quality of what you're getting done is vital in order to be ultimately successful and to progress and to grow in your learning. Okay, then again, of course, you got the final assessment. And again, we require 80% or better on the unit. Now, if you're taking a paper curriculum program, that 80% is going to be 100% weighted on your final test. If you're not, if you're online, then we actually weight it a little bit different, right? So 80% of the overall average of the unit is going to be the test, but then the projects and the lessons and the quizzes are also going to be a percentage of your overall weight for that unit. And the overall unit average has to be at least 80% or better. Again, that's an assessment that ensures the quality. And as you progress in that, again, hitting the benchmarks and assessing properly is going to ensure progress, but mastery-based quality progress, and that is very, very important. There's another assessment that we want to incorporate as well in our program, and that usually will occur in the springtime, and that is something called a norm-referenced test, a norm-referenced assessment. Well, what does that mean? Well, we like to use the Iowa assessment test, and basically it's we call it a norm-reference standardized test, in the fact that it's not something that comes back as, oh, you got a 50%, or you got a 90%, or you got 100% on this test. It's not going to give you a percentage accurate of correct or incorrect. It's going to say, compared to all the other students in our study group, compared to the other students in our sample group, you are performing at this level, right? And so that's an assessment that kind of says, based on how the rest of the country is going, this is how you are doing. If you're hitting your daily benchmarks, your weekly benchmarks, your unit benchmark, your monthly benchmarks, and your quarterly benchmarks, your standard comparison benchmarks, and if you're ensuring the quality of those, that assessment is accurate, right? And progressing along and making sure that you're doing those daily, weekly, monthly assessments accurately and properly, then that comparison assessment, like in Iowa, is going to be good quality. You're gonna find that your child is shining brightly compared to many, because unfortunately, benchmarks and assessments are just not something that many some programs are throwing them out. The entire state of Oregon said we're no longer going to worry about grades. We're no longer going to worry about assessments. That's a disservice to the child. It's not fair to them. They need to have benchmarks. They need to hit those and progress forward. But assessments ensure the quality of that. So many children are just moved along in that conveyor belt system in our world today of education. Oh, just move them along, move them to the next grade. Doesn't matter if they learned it or not. We don't want that. You don't want that, Mom and Dad. I know you don't. So we use the assessments on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to ensure the quality of the work and the progress forward is correct. So again, the two-sided coin, benchmarks and assessments. Let's use them both in our program. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, will you? Share it, follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and let's help get the word out about how important and vital Christian education is. God bless you. Have a great day.